Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. I'm anticipating Bob vanished again. Okay, now we can see you full screen.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
You know, we're a word of thought for Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I apologize to Jill for wearing my Carolina hat. You know,
I'll get over it one day.
You have backup, sir. You have backup.
thank you, Josh.
I had not anticipate. I don't anticipate that this will be a terribly long meeting. Bob and I discussed. Um, we had thought at the last meeting about who we, what we might have as a program for this meeting, and I think I can safely say we both got sort of tied up in different things and really have not been able to do that. Bob, you said yesterday you might make a last gasp effort to try to see if you had any thoughts or anything to report to the crowd.
Yeah, well, the other committee that I'm working on, we had narrowed the topics down to three that we seemed inclined to move forward on, and I think it's the same thing with this committee. We just need to figure out what discrete topics in the context of challenges and lawsuits we want to take a look at. And I still want to do the Article 3 issue just because nobody knows anything about it. And, it's not inconceivable that it could happen in this election cycle. So,
What that is, Bob.
well, that was the one that the provision in the state constitution that says if an election for an Article 3 office cannot be determined, then the General Assembly selects the winning candidate. And that's only happened once in the history. Josh, were you at the Board of Elections when that? You're too young, right?
Wasn't when the thing happened, when the enabling statute that they passed later, I was around for that piece.
Yeah. So there's legislation that was passed on how it would work, but I'm still not sure that they didn't go to the legislature too quickly as opposed to trying to get all the questions answered by the courts and then seeing if that would determine who the winner is. And that's to me, that's sort of the issue is, how quickly do you determine that the election has not been resolved and thus can go to the legislature versus having to continue to play it out in court. So anyway, nobody has studied that to my knowledge. And like I said, it's only been done once, but in this age we live in, it is not inconceivable that any of those council of state races could end up extraordinarily close and extraordinarily controversial in the sense of election issues. And so, does the General Assembly pick the next superintendent of public instruction, or do you let the court system play it out? So anyway, that's one, and I would be curious from everybody else's perspective if there are others that you think we ought to take a look at, either procedurally or substantively.
Sis, do you mind if I just level set just for the crew, the understanding statute you're referencing? So the enabling statute that would allow the General Assembly to come in, the trigger is any person. So you don't have to have standing in any kind of special way. Any person can file invoking that statute with the clerk, and it immediately divests all courts, presumably all courts just under state jurisdiction, all courts of that of any hearing or proceeding on that controversy, and then it kicks it directly to the assembly. So that I just want to make sure that folks understood what the justice was talking about there.
Yeah, it strikes me from talking to Bob that it's like hanging Chad, something no one has ever heard of until it's on the front page of every paper one morning. So I agree with Bob. It's one of our bullets. Let's see. Rachel just sent something around. I think check your chats.
Yeah, these are just the topics that when we first met back in October, we handed out a document that had just kind of like some suggested subtopics that you all could research and cover. And those were just the 3 that we had set aside for this committee. And these are just suggestions too. You can add to it. You cannot look into any of these. I just figured since we're brainstorming topics that I would just throw this in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, let me throw something else out for everybody to think about. There's sort of two tracks when it comes to challenges and lawsuits. One is sort of the longer term challenge to a statute. It's not immediately tied to a specific election. And then the second is an issue arising out of the election. And from anybody's experience, and I'm guessing maybe Josh and Jill may actually be the ones with the most experience. I mean, do you see problems, issues, either from a timing or a practicality standpoint? And why don't we just deal with immediate election challenges? So if there's a problem with the governor's race, does the system work sufficiently well to get it into court and get it resolved? Or
Yeah, no, I agree. Getting a prompt resolution is important. I think in some ways that's what the Supreme Court was saying in 2000. We may get the answer wrong, but we need an answer now.
Yeah.
Bob, I just want to jump in here and
Yep.
the question. So I know with campaign finance, our campaign finance committee, we're taking primarily an educational track, right? About these various topics. Are we taking the same track on this committee? Are we making recommendations? Are we reviewing potential gaps in the process? I mean, how do you see us attacking that? And that might help inform, I guess, the issues that we follow.
Yeah, I think David, what our president at Catawba had said, we need to be focusing in part on reassuring folks that the election system works. So so I guess in that context, Blake, if there's an issue, maybe it's a big race, maybe it's a small race, a legislative race, or and there's a problem, in the candidate or candidate committee or the party comes to one of you and says, "Yeah, we got to do something. You've got to do something." Is the process that we have in place, as good as we can get? What you want to do is, I think, and Josh referenced it, you want to resolve it quickly and fairly and with a degree of transparency. And maybe it's educational in the sense that the vast majority of people don't know how that works. If you think same day ballots, there are 500 same day ballots that or absentee ballots that are void, and the board, what do you do? How do you do? And does the system work? And not having had a lot of experience in that area, I'm not sure, I can't say, well, here's a problem we solved then, and maybe we need to get a couple of attorneys, other attorneys who litigate these issues, but I don't know whether it answered it. But I mean, I think it's a combination of, we'd like to have if there are recommendations needed, we put them out there in our report, but also to reassure the public that if you think there's something wrong with this election, it's been stolen. Okay. What's the process to prove your case? Does that make any sense?
No, it does. I was just trying to get my head around, how we wanted to approach the issues for this particular committee.
Let me ask Rachel, are we just identifying issues now to pass on to the larger committee, or are we supposed also to address these issues with recommendations within our committee?
So a mixture of both. So identifying the issues and the topics that you want to cover, and then figuring out best practices, maybe figuring out just suggested changes. What are other states doing? And then ultimately, like you could look into these topics and find out that we're doing everything great, and that's your suggestion, is that everything checks out. But yeah, I mean, we do want some feedback on these items, and just high level details. So I hope that helped answer your question. It is kind of a combination of both. Bob could probably elaborate on it a little bit more as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I'm curious, do any of you know from a party standpoint whether lawyers working for the Democrats, lawyers working for the Republicans are given some, is there a handbook, Jill's not, tell us, Jill.
I mean, I have a meeting at 12 today with the Democratic lawyer team for North Carolina for this election. And they're trying to figure this out. Normally there's a handbook, but the handbook is more like a voter protection kind of guide. The statutes about who can vote and who cannot, it doesn't really go into anything litigation wise or go that far. It's mainly on the local level in terms of challenging votes at the Board of Elections, for instance. Like here in New Hanover, and we still haven't resolved this, we had an issue throughout the municipal elections with a lot of people using Carolina Beach and Wrightsville beach houses as their addresses, essentially to vote in those precincts or elections, which aren't really their primary address. And to challenge those voters, you essentially have to show you have the affirmative responsibility to demonstrate that that person really doesn't live in that precinct. It became almost impossible to do that. And looking up the law for it, I'm positive that it was made to help Democrats in terms of like people without permanent housing, to make it so that they could vote. But after the voter registration deadline, it becomes nearly impossible. Then we wound up withdrawing all these challenges because we won these races, and I was not looking to give the Board of Elections a headache that they did not need to. But I am curious, like I know this very well on the local level. Once it gets to the actual court level, I am not as familiar as to what the actual process is and how you move it from point A to point B to a resolution. So I am curious in that myself. But I am happy to share some of the old handbooks I have with you, Justice Orr, if you want them, from other campaigns and election seasons.
Well, I think that would be helpful for us to see it. And I would ask you, so let's say the mayoral race in Wrightsville Beach, was really important. And it came down to these challenged ballots. There's obviously an administrative process. Does the Democratic Party give you any guidance that if the board denies your challenge to them?
I mean, my answer is going to be more of a political one, in the sense of like in New York, yes, there was a war team 24/7 for the Democratic Party that if you had any kind of legal or electoral issues, there was a team ready to help you from point A until the end. Here, I cannot give the same credit to at least the NCDP's legal team. It was good in 2020. I think it was an absolute useless disaster in 2022. They are rebuilding it clearly from scratch now. They are working on trying to get county party attorneys for each of the counties, but it's a mess, to be honest. So I do think from our perspective, it would be helpful as like we need to identify the issues and I think give guidelines on what best practices are, because I don't think anybody really knows them, at least on our side. And, you know, they're hiring consultants, but there is no solid legal team in place to advise. Hopefully by November there will be, but right now there is not, and it leaves me very concerned.
Would
Oh, sorry.
Josh, do you know whether the lawyers from the AG's office, who are the election law specialists, Terrence and Mary Carla, would they have answers? Would it be useful for them to tell us from their perspective on these things? Would that be a resource?
Sure. If the question is what is the procedural posture of a post-election contest, then there's not a real good source of truth in a written form. I mean, I could certainly brief you. We overturned 9 elections while I was there in those 5 years, and we established some precedent with writs supersedeas and ways to get around things procedurally. Happy to brief you. Paul Cox, though, who obviously did our briefing earlier and came over from the AG's office, he's kind of assumed that role more and more, and the legal counsel at the board have become the experts. The AG's office could theoretically. It's just they've ended up pulling themselves out at different times when their principal is running for another office. That happened, Bob, back in the race where we were on other sides of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is that something we think that this committee should at least explore?
Can I just put one other thing out there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the yet another Cooper B. Burger case that's making its way up right now, if we get to a place where we have a tie, that defaults in a canvass vote to a no certification. So at present, if we were to build up a huge body of recommendations based on the current state of the law, we just need to keep a real good eye on whether the Supreme Court ends up kind of reversing its prior position on even split certification, because that would really put in the spotlight the post-election process. Because if you have a lack of certification, well, then you could make a credible argument that it should go to the legislature, et cetera, because you don't have certification below. And even if it was done on partisan lines, which is the nightmare scenario that a lot of folks that I'm talking to at Brennan and a bunch of other places are envisioning for North Carolina. That you have a couple critical areas where there's not a certification, and that a campaign makes a credible argument that there is no vote and therefore should kick back to the legislative process, kind of in the olden times.
Is there a step-by-step process that the Board of Elections has put out, walking people through the certification process?
They put out guidance on Canvas. They haven't put out guidance contemplating an even split board, because that's not the current state of things.
Okay. I guess I think this is what we all want to talk about or study. I'm not 100% sure at this moment how we best, get the information.
I'm happy to try to compile what the board puts out publicly, and then Jill, my spouse just joined the NCDP as their VoPro director last week, so she will try to fix
That's
that.
the meeting probably that she'll be at next.
So Kat's doing that.
There you go. Yeah, she's doing that now. Never would have thought. We used to be Republicans. Yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
And I could get anything from our local board. They're actually very helpful and they always give me whatever kind of manuals, guides. I can see what our local boards of elections here in New Hanover would give me if I was going to go through with an actual challenge.
Yeah, if we could all kind of poke around and see what documentation, either through boards of elections or through the political parties, are out there. And I don't know, Rachel, I hate to add another chore to your responsibilities, but could you kind of be the clearinghouse for it?
Yeah, that's completely fine.
Yeah, and we are hoping to have a college intern with us this summer to help on stuff. So I think if we could kind of look at that, then we could sort of figure out pretty quickly how to narrow and tailor the what we're looking at and recommendations. But I do think as we sit here and sort of struggle about, well, how does this play out? And I think let's focus on election challenges, because I think, you know, a redistricting challenge or voter ID challenge, you know, that's just sort of normal litigation. It just happens to affect elections. But it's that heat of the moment. And I will tell one very, very quick story. I was the only Republican in the appellate judiciary in '90, and a couple of Democrat Superior Court judges kept the polls open in 2 or 3 very heavily Democrat precincts because of long lines and other issues. And this was the Helms Hunt, or it was at least a Helms Senate race. And fortunately, I was out of pocket, but Helms's chief guru was trying to get in touch with me to get me to unilaterally enjoin the Superior Court judges, you know, from keeping the precincts open, which is, you know, it's that kind of gunboat court actions that, you know, you don't want to have, and that's where you end up with all of these controversies, I think. So
I can follow up on that one, Bob, because I was the U.S. attorney in the Middle District at the time, and the courts that were being, or the voting sites that were being held open were in Durham. And some of those folks who couldn't get you got me and said, you got to do something. Department of Justice and said, you can't do a thing. These are election matters run by the states.
Yeah. So, and this kind of circles back to our education mission. But I think if we can put things out here over the course of the summer about here's how it works, you know, if you that would be a huge benefit. And if we tackle this Article 3 deal and at least get people talking about it, the press reporting on it, I think that would serve a useful purpose.
I tend to agree, Bob. And I mean, I don't want to talk all over everybody else, but I think it's also sort of the right dimensions, something we can tackle without trying to bite off more than we can chew.
All right. Well, I mean, so
it might be that should be, if that's the biggest topic, then perhaps we should, I mean, if the agreement is the post-election challenges process and all these other issues are well established, maybe this is the area where we focus the bulk of this report on.
Well, we're not trying to ramrod anything through, Blake. If you've got other ideas, please let us know.
No. I mean, I think that this is probably the biggest issue. So, and I think that's the consensus that I'm getting here. So,
yeah. What do you think? Would it be useful to get whoever the lawyer for the respective political parties to talk about it, or are they not going to want to talk about it? I mean, that's anybody get?
Has been that these lawyers usually know each other and get along personally fairly well. And getting a couple of them might not be bad. I've never experienced them saying, no, I don't want to talk to that SOB.
Yeah. Well, it would be helpful if, say, Jill, you approach the Democrat Party in the state. Bob, you want to do the Republican, and just say, hey, we're trying to understand the political process if there's a problem immediately surrounding the election. Would you be willing to talk to members of our commission about sort of how it works or problems you've seen? I mean, I just don't know. Even if they're reorganizing at the Democrat Party, surely there's some lawyer there, and maybe it's a national deal. I don't know. We get Mark Elias to come, but
The person we've always used, at least since I've been back here in 2020, I've always been referred to John Wallace
and John would be great. Yeah,
for state issues.
Is John a Democrat or Republican, Jill?
I think it's Democrat.
Oh yeah.
Who would be a Republican? Because I'm a little bit out of that, Bob. All I can come up with on the top of my head is Phil Stratt.
I think Phil's the redistricting guy, but I don't know whether Michael McKnight or Tom Farr. I know Tom does redistricting too.
Might be good. Marshall Hurley used to do those things in Greensboro, but he's not practicing, I don't believe.
Yeah. Plus, I think he's non-affiliated now.
Don't say that like an insult. It can bite.
All right. Well, Bob, could you maybe poke around, ask, just see who the best person to talk with? Simply the question, hey, if a problem happened on election day and you thought, and you had to get the lawyers in, who's going to be shepherding this process?
Yeah, I'll ask Bob Hunter. I mean, not for him to take that role since he's already spoken to us, but if he can let me know who the Young Turks are, i.e. 60. I'll follow up with that.
Okay, that'd be good. Yeah, we're getting closer than I like.
Well, I think that's sort of what we were going to do at the last meeting that of the campaign committee or finance committee meeting on Wednesday that several of Jill, you're the only one who wasn't on that. They were sort of focusing on getting ready, getting started on the report. I begged off of that one because thanks to my friend Justice Orr, I'm at least chair of this committee, so I figured I'd be working on it. But we do need to, I think, schedule the next meeting, and Jill, you and I'll try to see if we can get the attorneys to who would join us by Zoom for a short meeting. Rachel, do you have any? Let's see. We are in mid-March, so I would assume like mid-May for the next meeting, or should we try to do it sooner?
So I know we set up recurring meetings for each month. Let me see when the next one is.
April 12th.
Friday. Yeah, April 12th.
Okay, let's aim for that then. Jill's that work?
Perfect.
Yes.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, and if we get any written documents, if we could send them to Rachel, and then she can kind of package stuff to the committee for reading.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible. While we were talking, Josh had circulated 2 sites. I was able to copy them and paste them onto my computer and print them out. So if anybody needs those sites, at least they're there. Of course, they'll vanish as soon as we get off the.
Yeah.
Well, I've copied them down as well, and so when I follow up with the notes, I'll make sure to include them as resources.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel.
Mhm.
And before we go, I thought Bob and Rachel might want to mention what's going on with the Carter Center, because it's stuff that might interest everybody on this call, and the meeting that's coming up at Catawba and some of the other things.
Which was in the newsletter. Is that what you're referencing?
It's a good reminder because you'll need to register if you're going to go, I believe, and so forth.
Yeah, you're talking about the Carter's, the event that Catawba College is sponsoring, Bob, or the 2 upcoming trusted election tours that we're going to do 2 early trusted election tours, one up in Cullowhee, up in God's country. Jill, that's only a 5.5-hour drive, 6.5-hour drive.
I loved it. Come down here again. It was such a great event.
Well, we will be coming your way, but we need to get you out of that beach community. But we're doing that, and we're also doing one in the Triad on May 7th, and so there, and we're also the Carter Center development teams are doing little luncheons in advance of those town halls. But we're in the process of trying to put that schedule together. And then, Michael Bitzer and Catawba have opened this, or beginning this new program there at the school. And Rachel, do you know the date for that?
Let me see. It's March 27th at 7 p.m.
And that's when we need to register for, isn't it, Rachel?
So I don't believe that you have to register for that one. I think that one you can just show up. The one that you have to register for is we have a media literacy training, and that's on March 19th at noon. I believe that's the only one that you have to register for. But I will add that we are going to be having Karen Brinson Bell presenting to the committee. That's going to be on March 27th at 11:30. We're going to send out a notice for it, but she's going to be doing just an overview of how the primaries went and do kind of like a Q&A portion. So when we send out that notice, we're going to have just like a portion asking you all that if you have any questions, to submit them to us, and we'll be sending those to Karen Brinson Bell in advance for her to answer on the call.
So lots going on. The year will roll back quickly.
Just stop the seal. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I think we've got our marching orders.
Yeah, I think so. I appreciate everybody getting on, and I'm just glad I got on. Continue to struggle. All right, gang.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rachel.
Right. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thank
weekend.
y'all. Have a good one.